Hi, Adrian.
Hi, Hakeem, how are you?
All good, thank you. All good. Ready to start. We are already streaming on YouTube. So, hello, everyone. Hi, Adrian.
Hi, all good. Uh,
So, yeah, give me 1 second. All right. So, let's kick off. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar on how to kill the click-sucking vampires. We had a very good conversation during this week with Adrian, and we streamed a similar webinar, and people wanted to ask some questions, so we will give them the opportunity, and we are answering these questions live. And please, everyone that is watching this webinar on YouTube, please type your questions on the chat. I will be keeping an eye and ask the questions to Adrian. So, Adrian, how are you today? All
yeah.
good?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Brilliant. So, let's start talking about vampires and how to kill the click sucking vampires. Um, let's talk about this and who are these type of organizations, who are the Draculas, the vampires, your own demons, etc.
Yeah. Okay. So when we start working, or even start talking to prospective clients for them, start working with clients, one of the things that we look for is how their budget is being spent, and the the way that LinkedIn works, when if we're talking about LinkedIn specifically, the way that LinkedIn works is obviously it's targeting people, and therefore there are organizations that have huge numbers of people on LinkedIn and kind of digesting content on LinkedIn, um, but they're not necessarily buyers. And so what can happen if you don't manage this process is you can have huge amounts of your budget being um, sucked up by a relatively small number of very big businesses. And so the Draculas we're referring to probably the UK's biggest organizations, particularly those in kind of professional services type function. And they had just literally have tens of thousands of people on LinkedIn. And so it's very easy for your content to be of interest to somebody in a auditing firm or a big consulting firm or one of the big financial institutions. And so it's interesting to them personally. They'll click. So at that point, potentially costing you money, but they're not necessarily in your target addressable market. And in fact, for most of our clients and most of our prospects, those very large companies aren't in their target market. So you have a significant proportion of your budget being sucked up because they're clicking on your content, clicking on your ads, specifically the ads, even maybe downloading content because they're interested. So it kind of look like they're engaged, but in reality, will never buy from you. And so that's something we immediately look for. And it is relatively straightforward, but it is something that everybody should be doing. And you can save yourself a significant sum of money just in that one thing. But then there are also other companies that may well be interested in your content. So that could be related sectors and industries, um, companies that um, react to your advert because it's a well crafted, well presented advert. But again, they sit way outside your total addressable market. So then you
Mhm.
can find you've got this next group of what is a much larger group of companies, still typically big companies,
Yeah.
engaging less, but because the number of them again are consistently sucking budget away from your campaign. And then the third one is those kind of we call them personal demons, and that really is companies that will be interested in you, but you don't want them to be spending your budget. So that could be your competitors, right? So you don't want to have your competitors spending your budget. Sure, they're going to find you online, they're going to track what you're doing, but they can do that through the organic content, right? Let's not have them be exposed to ads and spending your ad budget. And then you might be, if you're in a large group of companies, your content is interesting to your colleagues and other people, in different companies, but as part of your network. And so if you're in a large group of companies, again, just being sensibly going through, who are my competitors, who are the companies that will be interested in us, but we don't want to spend money on. And you can build that list across those three categories and make sure that therefore you're not targeting your adverts at them, and therefore they're not tempted to click on them and spend your money.
Yeah, it's important to remind our audience how we obtain this data. Okay, we analyzed our clients' data for over a year, so 23 companies, 34 million impressions, and thousands of clicks, and we realized that the same companies appear again and again and again. We released a document with these companies, and you can see them. Like, for example, I'm reading the list here: HSBC, Accenture, Amazon, Bayer, Ernst & Young, BNP Paribas, like huge organizations with thousands of employees on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I would challenge anyone that is trying to sell to these companies, and if they believe that they could run a LinkedIn ad campaign and persuading to them to buy, probably they are targeting very specific job titles, but still you see on their campaigns that these companies appear again and again and again, even if you are not targeting them, right?
Yeah, I mean, part of the LinkedIn process, it is, there are, if you're looking at job titles, looking at seniority, you're looking even at size of company, a lot of those companies that you've touched on will have other related companies that might fall into that bracket, right? And then the matching algorithm, captures those bigger companies. So yeah, it's a simple thing to do, really worthwhile though, because you can save yourself a lot of money. And of course, there's another advantage. It's not just the fact that you're not spending money on them. It means that your activity is more targeted by excluding them, right? So you're still not super targeted by excluding 50 or 100 companies, but you're at least making sure your budget is going towards the kind of objective of your campaign. So it's a very easy thing to control.
That's correct. All right, so let's talk. Well, we were already talking about why this problem exists, but here are some keys that we could talk about. So that most digital platforms were built for B2C, not for B2B, and these platforms are focused on people first rather than businesses, right?
So yeah, I'll spot the slight typo in our slide.
Yeah, I realized that as well.
Right, but so most platforms, right, originated from a B2C perspective, and LinkedIn in many ways is the same, right? It was about connecting with a professional community, and if you look at Meta and Instagram and Twitter and everything else, they are very much focused on people and consumers. So the problem we have is that a lot of the targeting and a lot of the ways that as marketeers we can approach our B2B activity is limited by that factor. Now, LinkedIn is a big step in the right direction. That's why it's so popular, and that's why it's getting so expensive, right? Because at least there is the ability to target companies.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's true.
But still, the process is about reaching people. So if you're not targeting your activity, super targeting your activity in LinkedIn, the process to reach as many people as possible, which is ultimately the objective, it is because underlying all of these platforms is that people connection. So that's what happens. And you've got these, you've got a lot of companies with a lot of companies with big workforces big teams spending a lot of time on LinkedIn, and therefore, that's how you build up these. That's why this phenomenon exists, and so you need to just basically get hold of it as quickly as you can.
I have a question from our audience. So Stephen is asking, please, Stephen, if you could give more details about you, it would be great. What are the first signs that a company is wasting a significant portion of their ad budget on vampires? I think that's a very good question.
Yeah, it is actually. It isn't necessarily easy to see, because you can be having pretty good results, right? So your click-through rates, all those things that you kind of look at to see if your campaign is performing, seem to be good. But you're not getting the end result you want. You're not getting the right number of leads, and depending on how you clarify lead, right? So LinkedIn, we very much talk around the need to do awareness and consideration that generates a contact, which you then develop into a lead. And obviously you can do that through LinkedIn, but also you can do it through your own processes. But if you think about that process, those people that you need to connect with at the right companies. So if you're doing that and you're looking at your performance and you're not getting the end result, which is the right people into the sales funnel, that is when we will look, why is that budget not achieving that end result? And of course, there are a number of factors, but it's often when you look at that and you go, wow, we had an audience audit where 20% of the budget was being sucked up by what was a pretty obvious group of companies that could have been excluded. So that was an extreme case, but it was that particular campaign, for whatever reason, was just being destroyed by that activity. So it's not easy to see, but it's one of the first things you would look at with your performance in terms of actual results isn't where you want it to be. But I would recommend that you just do it for every campaign. So look at who your campaign is engaging with, look at who impressions are being served to, look at who you're getting clicks from, and quite quickly establish, is there a pattern there that you can manage to achieve a stronger result? And in most cases, I think the answer to that would be yes. And it doesn't cost anything for you to do. It's just about careful.
Being careful that you are serving impressions to companies that are a good fit for your business, that you are not serving impressions to your competitors or even companies from your own organization. We've seen that as well, right? Great. So let's talk also about about measuring correctly, right? We talked before that a lot of the platforms come from a B2C perspective, and a lot of the metrics also are inherited from B2C, right? So let's talk about impressions, clicks, cost per click, CTR versus other more suitable metrics.
Yeah, this is really interesting, because often we end up in a situation, talking to people where they're talking about the campaigns and they talk about the success of those campaigns. And we're getting the right reach. Our clicks are good. We're happy with our CPC, but we're not getting the results we want. And that is, we've talked a bit about one of the reasons, but there are lots of reasons why that can happen and how you can manage it. But the big problem is that isn't really telling you how successful your campaign is being if your objective is to drive more business and more revenue. So, because in a consumer world, I can't track as easily what the end result in revenue terms is. Yes, I can do it kind of in a kind of separated way, but in terms of, from a business perspective, what I want to see is the people I've advertised to and the people I'm spending money on, do they come into my sales funnel and do they convert? So I think it's really important that we focus on the right metrics, and those are not, am I getting a good click-through rate? Sure, you want to make sure your campaign is performing. But if your click-through rate is great, but the end result in terms of conversion and revenue through your sales pipeline is poor, then again, you're wasting your time, right? So it's really important that we look at that process and we understand, the early indicators as well. So yes, your campaign needs to be doing the right thing. So the kind of consumer-led metrics around click-throughs and cost per clicks and all that is a good starting point. But the most important thing is what happens when those people end up in my funnel. Are they going from an MQL to an SQL? Are they becoming sales accepted? And then are they converting? And we work with a number of clients who have no problem at all getting leads, right? They have no problem at all. They can get leads because they're big brands, they're well known, their proposition's well known. As a consumer brand, we've got several examples where we've got consumer brands that have a business proposition. And so what they find is campaigns working really well, content's being consumed, but they're not getting the activity in the sales funnel. And so that is about then, okay, am I targeting the right people? Am I getting to the right people? And then when I do, what we typically see is those metrics on the sales side start to improve. So yeah, a big part of what we would be looking at is how do you get the right people into the funnel, not just the right activity. So I think it's massively important. I think it's probably not taken or not measured as seriously as it should be. And often the people we're talking to when we're first introduced to them, are talking about click-through rates, talking about the success of the campaign from a marketing perspective rather than the follow through into the sales funnel. And that's where you can have the biggest impact if you get it right.
Sure. And click percent, that's it's also an interesting one, because if we come back to the B2C world, basically everyone can buy your products, right? But click percent shows us something which is interesting, which is the number of organizations with at least one click divided by the total number of unique organizations that you're advertising to. So this metric accounts finally for the fact that a company can usually only buy your service once, which is also a different thing from B2C, right?
Yeah. So
you can buy, whatever cans of Coke you want, but with B2B it's a bit different.
Yeah, that metric is really important because the end result of my campaign should be that I've reached the right people in the right companies, and therefore understanding am I getting the right number of companies as a percentage of my activity is super important. And so yeah, that metric if you're not using that metric, using that metric on LinkedIn to understand is my reach in terms of company reach correct? Super. So yeah, good, really good metric. And if I'm doing that, then I can look at, am I reaching the right target addressable market? And then if I am, then fine tuning LinkedIn to make sure I reach the right people in those organizations, and that then drives your sales engagement.
Well, we have another question from our audience. Thank you so much. I don't know your name, but how does AdZag help in identifying and eliminating these vampire organizations? Good question. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess there's two ways of looking at this. We've talked about one, which is the suppression process, right? And so that's really really straightforward, and yet we can help with this, but you can do this yourself. So looking at your activity and what we do with all people we're speaking to, is not just our customers, but in the earlier stages of the engagement with our prospective customers, identify these companies, which you can easily do. It's a bit of effort required through Campaign Manager. Build your list and suppress them, and you can start with the easy one, the biggest ones, the ones that are having the most impact, and build a suppression list. But as you go through that, add to that list companies that repeatedly keep coming into your engagement numbers, but you don't want there. Deciding who else in your who else in the community we talked about, whether it's competitors, group companies, whatever it is, who else do you need to exclude? Get those people excluded, and that is what we would do, kind of 101. But what people should be doing, full stop, really. So yeah, that's how we would handle it. And I think, from our perspective, we go way further than this, obviously. So our whole view is that actually you should only be advertising to companies that can buy your product. So we go way beyond this, which is not just about suppressions, although suppressions are still useful even with that, but it really is about who should you be targeting, which companies can buy from you, and making sure those are the people you're reaching.
Yeah, I think it's also good to mention that anyone can benefit from our free trial version from an audience audit. And would you like to explain what an audience audit is and how everyone can benefit from this?
Yeah, so an audience audit is a way, we've developed a way of looking back at our company's LinkedIn activity, and then using, so we track 800 different signals across UK's economy, business economy. So 800 different signals. Now, what we've developed is we've taken some of the most common signals, and what we do is we analyze the company's activity based on those more common signals to identify which are the best fits. So the people engaging with, who are the best fit companies that are most likely to engage and work with them, versus those that are least likely to. And this is not unusual to see these sorts of numbers where we can see as much as 80 to 90% of activity going against companies who are less likely to buy from you. So we call those, bad fit examples. And looking at the list on the screen, right, you can see there's some very big companies on there, which for this particular, when we did this particular audit, should not have been.
Yeah. Just to I remind, this is an audience audit for a software delivery company, okay, and they provide this service to small and mid-sized organizations. And if we look at the size of the audience and the target audience and how they are targeting mostly a very bad fit. And if we see the example of companies that they are targeting, again, the same Draculas, they come again and again and again, Amazon, Accenture, IBM, Cognizant. So definitely are not in their target list. And look at the impressions. So they're having the majority of the impressions, and these are good quality fit companies, and look, they are only having 16 impressions. So if you want to target them, yes, go after your client lists and suppress all of these other big Draculas that are sucking your budget.
Sure. And I think the other thing that was really interesting when if we look at the second graphic, is that the companies that are in your target audience are also more likely to engage with you, which is logical, right? So if we're putting the right proposition in front of the right people, they're more likely to engage. So it's a double whammy, because if you can focus your budget on the right companies, they will then engage better with you and ultimately have much more chance of converting into sales when they then drop into the pipeline. So it really makes a lot of sense to look at how you're targeting. This is just a very simple process in terms of compared to kind of the service we offer. But you're right, this is something anybody can do. You can go to our website, you can get this done. And we can help you understand how to immediately make some savings. So yeah, I'd kind of suggest to anybody it's worth a look at. If you're spending money on LinkedIn, why not help understand where you're getting both budget leakage and where you could do a better job in terms of targeting.
We have two questions from Tom, who's asking who can benefit from this. Is it only for large organizations? And the other question is about the signals. What kind of signals can you provide that are not the ones that are on LinkedIn, for example, like the filters that you can get from LinkedIn?
Yeah, so First question: anybody can benefit if they're spending money consistently on LinkedIn. So it doesn't need to be, this process here. Anybody can benefit. The more you are spending, so our customers are typically spending between £5,000 and £20,000 a month. So it's £5,000, £20,000 a month on LinkedIn. So we typically work with people who are spending more money on LinkedIn. But anybody can benefit from this if you've got a reasonable track record on LinkedIn in terms of advertising spend. So that's that point. So it's not about the size of the company, it's more about your digital marketing activity and how core, for this particular process, how core LinkedIn is to that. So that's that one. In terms of signals, yeah, so obviously LinkedIn has things like the size of the company, growth, number of employees, various industry, so various filters, if you like. That differs from what we do. We have 800 different signals, which can be very nuanced around, how not just about kind of the core firmographic information that is available on companies around size and employee count and all those good stuff that you need, but then getting down into, it might be around their technology profile, it might be around culturally, what are the things that they're talking about on their website, and therefore what is important to them as a business.
For example, a company like the one we were describing before, a software company business. So signals relevant to them are, I don't know, what are the technology that they're running behind the website.
Because it's not about them.
Mm-hmm. No, not them. They're exactly potentially, yeah.
So it depends. They may be targeting customers that have a particular type of technology or don't have a particular type of technology, right? So that's just one factor, but they might also be targeting companies that show particular traits. Are they B2C companies? Are they B2B companies? Are they companies that invest, in sustainability? There's 800 of them, so there's loads of them, right? So the targeting, is unique to every company. So out of those 800 signals, probably our customers end up with a targeting profile that contains about 30 of those signals, which we've identified from their existing customer base. And they can be very nuanced. I mean, there's some crazy ones, like a number of car parking spaces people have. What are they importing and exporting? So we can see through manifest what's being imported and exported. So there's lots of things. We've got a very, very big customer that that looks to work with people who invest significantly in their people. So what are they talking around in terms of benefits, culture? How do they express
those kind of signals? I love those kind of signals that you can identify the cultural attributes of a company. If they are interested in their people, if they have videos talking about culture in their careers page, for example, those kind of things that are impossible to find. Example, using LinkedIn filters, right?
Or any, very different.
Anything else, yeah. Well, Adrian, we are coming to an end. To our audience, thank you so much for being active today, asking questions. I hope we answered them. And stay tuned, because we will be doing this weekly. Next week, you can find us again. We will release all the details on LinkedIn, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.